Hey, what's up guys? Joker here. Today we're going to be taking a look at the PC performance in For Honor as it pertains to the closed beta, which is going on right now at the time of me making this video. It was something you had to sign up for about a month ago, so if you didn't get into the closed beta, unfortunately, you're probably going to have to wait until the game does come out on February 14th, unless they decide to do an open beta weekend between now and the time of release, which is a definite possibility, but as of right now, I don't believe they have announced anything firm yet as far as an open beta is concerned. But we'll be focusing on the PC performance here today with the GTX 1060, RX 480, and the GTX 1080, so hopefully that'll answer some of your questions out there as to how well this game can run. If you do want to pick this game up, I'm going to leave a link down in the description below over to cdkeys.com, where right now the game is about $40 over there, so if you want to pick the game up, save a few bucks, and support the channel, go ahead and hit up CD Keys down in the description below. But we're going to be going through all of the cards here, the GTX 1080 and the 1060. Those were both overclocked with 200 megahertz on the core and 300 megahertz on the memory, while the RX 480 was bumped up to 1400 megahertz on the core and 2150 on the memory, and all of our cards did have the power limit increased to the highest that it would go all the way to the right on the slider, and our system here is using the i7 6800K and 32 gigabytes of DDR4 memory. But let's get fired into the options menu here now so we can see what settings are available to us and which ones we were using during all of our testing. You can see we do have full screen borderless windowed as well as full screen mode. You can switch between different monitors on the fly, which is always something I appreciate. I'm running at 1440, 120 hertz right now in the RX 480, but you do have 144 hertz support if that's something you do want to go ahead and utilize. And for the aspect ratio, they've even got 21:9 support in here, so very nice to go ahead and see that from Ubisoft. And the FOV slider goes from 60 all the way up to 90, so very good range, at least for a third-person game as far as I'm concerned. Let's go ahead into the advanced options now, which is in a separate menu. We've got our anisotropic filtering bumped up to 16 times. For the anti-aliasing, you can either run that off with FXAA, SMAA, which I personally use for all of my testing, or you can use temporal anti-aliasing, which I personally don't like. I find that it just makes everything look really blurry. So SMAA is the form of anti-aliasing that I was using in all of my testing. We do have a render scaling slider here, which by default is at 100%, but you can lower this down if you want to, down all the way to 25%. So that's some seriously low resolution if you want to go ahead and lower it down that much. For the geometric detail, we've got that at extreme. We've also got our texture quality, dynamic shadows, environmental detail, ambient occlusion, where we've got off. We've also got HBAO plus, which is the Nvidia HBAO, and then we've got MHBAO, which they describe as a new technique that combines HBAO and MSSAO with reduced flickering, visible ambient occlusion on borders, and SSSO, specular occlusion. So that's a new form of anti-aliasing that I personally haven't seen yet. It's the one all the way to the right, so that's the one that we're using. We've, of course, got dynamic reflections enabled, and I have disabled motion blur, and we're not using the super sample anti-aliasing, which effectively doubles your resolution. So if you want to just cut your frame rate in half for whatever reason, if you've got ample performance to spare, like if you're running a Titan X Pascal 1080p, then by all means, go ahead and crack on the super sampling. But let's go ahead and jump in now and take a look at the RX 480 versus the GTX 1060. Our first matchup here at 1080p, where we see the GTX 1060 getting an average of 99 FPS and a minimum of 88, while the RX 480 gets an average of 91 and a minimum of 73. So both of these cards really able to run this game at well over 60 frames at 1080p, and I did not see the VRAM usage going over, it was under 3 gigabytes at 1080p. At 1440, it was just north of 3 gigabytes, but not by much. So it sounds like Ubisoft kind of hit the mark with their recommended requirements for this game, where they said 1080 high would need about a 3 gigabyte card. So yeah, they pretty much hit the mark on that. If you're running anything like a 3 gigabyte card, or more, you should not have any issues as far as memory allocation is concerned on this game. At 1440p, we saw the average on the GTX 1060 at 62 and a minimum of 57, while the RX 480 got an average of 61 and a minimum of 54. So much tighter at 1440p, but at 1080p, the GTX 1060 won by 8 FPS there in the averages. So this game does appear to be better optimized right now, at least, in the beta for Nvidia, but then again, this is a Nvidia title. It's got the Nvidia splash screen and everything when you go ahead and start up the game. It's got their HBO Plus in the title, so we may have to just wait for some better driver optimization from AMD. Maybe they'll be able to close the gap between now and the time of release, because we've seen with titles in the past where even after the games have come out, even on GameWorks titles, they've been able to improve performance over time and then even eventually beating out Nvidia in some cases. But looking at the GTX 1080 here, we can see at 1080p and 1440p, we've got an average of 166 and a minimum of 144 at 1080p, while at 1440p we got an average of 111 and a minimum of 90. So the GTX 1080 absolutely crushing it at 1080p and 1440p. 144 hertz monitor. Owners should be rejoicing, especially at 1080 with that minimum of 144. Like, are you kidding me? Like, well done, Ubisoft. Like, you have optimized the living shit out of this game, because we're a couple of weeks before launch. We still don't have drivers from AMD and Nvidia, and both sides are running the game extremely well with averages over 60 FPS in 1440p even on the GTX 1060 and RX 480. So just like, seriously, job well done, Ubisoft. You've optimized a game here in 2017. We're off to a very good start here. We just had Resident Evil 7 come out, which ran exceedingly well on both sides of the fence, and now we see this game coming out running very well too. So really awesome to just have a good start here to 2017 and seeing good performance in the titles that we've tested so far this year. I even tested the GTX 1080 in 4K, where that was able to get an average of 59 FPS and a minimum of 52. So even 4K is certainly viable with the likes of the GTX 1080. If you're out there running, Titan X Pascal, certainly you'll probably be able to run, north of 60 frames. But, even like I said, the 1080 at 4K is averaging nearly 60 FPS. So very playable if you get in there and probably tweak some settings, maybe lower down ambient occlusion or disable anti-aliasing, which is something you're probably not going to need as much of for 4K. So yeah, really well optimized game, Ubisoft. I've got no complaints about this one. I'm enjoying the gameplay so far. It's, it's a multiplayer based, kind of like really action focused type of MOBA. I usually don't like MOBAs, but being that this one is more action oriented, where you're kind of in the mix of everything and going up against other players and everything, I think this is a game I'm probably going to pick up. So if you guys want to pick it up as well, once again, I'm going to leave a link down in the description below over to CD Keys if you want to save a few bucks and pick up For Honor. But I'm going to go ahead and get on out of here, guys. Please let me know your thoughts, as always, down in the comments. I'd be appreciative of that. Looking forward to all the discussion down there, and I'll catch you guys next time.